Alright, before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for watching and for supporting me so much. Last video, I asked you guys to give me likes, comments, and subscribes, and you guys came through. So these types of things really help my channel. It helps it grow. It helps more people come to watch, and as I get more content and that type of thing, I'm able to do bigger and better things for you guys, get more products and that type of thing. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. Continue to support me, and we're gonna have a good time going forward. So for those of you who aren't in the Air Force, I know this touchy-feely stuff is a little uncomfortable, so we're gonna go ahead and launch into our topic for today. So I've been getting a lot of questions about which rifle sling should I get for my AR-15/M4/M16/ whatever they're using. So we're gonna take a moment to talk about that, and we're gonna be mostly relating this to military and law enforcement. Now that being said, it's still gonna be applicable for my civilian friends, or God forbid, my airsofters. So stay tuned and prepare to get some knowledge dropped on you. So first off, we have three main sling types that are out there for the AR-15 world, basically. So those three main types are single point, 2-point, and 3-point. So single point and 2-point both have their merits and reasons why you might want to use them. A 3-point, you're going to want to use it if you want to cover the controls on your weapon, cause malfunctions, and otherwise fight with the sling. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a 3-point sling and we're going to cut it out of the picture. It's not necessary. It's not used anymore for good reason because it causes a lot of problems. So we essentially have our single point and our 2-point sling. So first off, let's talk about a single point because I get a lot of questions about should I buy a dedicated single point sling. So the answer for a too long didn't read type thing is don't buy a dedicated single point sling. Now there are slings that are set up to where they can convert from single point to 2-point. Those are good slings, and there are some very good companies that make them. But before we talk about that, let's talk about some of the problems that you run into with a single point sling. So what's good about the single point sling is that it's very easy to switch shoulders when you're fighting off a barricade. Now, depending on what you're doing, you may or may not do this. For example, when I'm working with a team and clearing rooms and clearing buildings, I'm not going to be switching the shoulder for the most part. There are a couple instances where I will, but typically I'm moving so fast and so dynamically that I'm not going to be switching my shoulders. I'm just going to be keeping it on my strong side. And that's because I'm with a huge group of guys covering. Point is, we're not doing that based on our SOPs, but some guys will. Now, for my law enforcement officer who might be moving through a house by himself because his backup hasn't arrived or whatever, I'm not exactly sure how you guys work, but you might need to be more deliberate in the way that you're clearing a building. So you might be switching shoulders as you're moving through. And if that's the case, it's hard to beat the single point. It's very smooth. It's very easy to transition shoulders. So as a law enforcement guy, or hell, if you're a military guy and you might be doing those more deliberate building searches, a single point has some good merits to it. Now, here are a couple problems with single point. If you need to go hands off your weapon, i.e. no hands are on your weapon, it's going to drop in a very awkward angle and probably hit you in the dick, which really hurts and is not fun. Another problem with this is if you are hands off and you have to move or run, it's dangling between your legs and it's at a very disadvantageous spot in order to do any type of movement. The other problem that you get with it is that if you go hands-on with somebody, for those of you who have gone through CQB courses or have gone through SOCP, that was so much fun, you know that if that rifle gets between you and your assailant, then they can get their hands on it. You don't need training to understand that that is bad. So that is the problem with the single point because it is hard to get it off your body, get it away from you. That way you can deal with whatever you have to deal with. One other problem that we run into with single point slings is that should you need to climb or do anything that requires you to sling that rifle on your back, it's going to be pretty difficult to do so with a single point sling. Now it's for that reason, the ones I've mentioned before, that I don't recommend a dedicated single point sling setup. Now there are hybrids out there. The hybrids allow them to be convertible from single point to 2-point. So if you really, really want that ability to have a single point sling setup, I would recommend that you use the convertible from the single point to the 2-point. Now there are several good ones out there. I'm going to mention two right off the top of my head that I've used and that I like quite a bit. The first one is going to be the Magpul MS4. The Magpul MS4 has a piece of hardware right near the rear QD mount that allows you to plug in the front. So you can go from 2-point to single point quite easily. Now, the problem with the Magpul MS4 is it is hard to adjust. However, this webbing is quite wide, so it is comfortable to wear for an extended period of time, and I've done that before. The other convertible sling that I would recommend would be my father's, Haley Strategic, definitely not my father's company who grew me in a vat underneath his basement. They make the Haley Strategic Gh3 sling. Now, what's good about the Gh3 sling is that it has wide webbing, it has a padded shoulder similar to the Ferro concept Slingster that I have on right now. And the biggest point for me is that the adjustability when you're using it in a 2-point configuration is really simple to use and to manipulate. Now, it's also lighter. And so for my Marines out there, and Travis Haley was a Marine, it's important that you consider weight. So Haley's Gh3 sling weighs a little bit less. Now, the reason for that is this little piece of hardware right here, and that's going to add weight over a traditional 2-point setup. Why this is important for my Marines is if I could quantify the weight of this, it's approximately a 24 pack of crayons. That's a lot of nutrition to sustain you for the warfight. So it's something to think about. In reality, the weight's not really that big of a deal. The only thing that, that I will say about convertible is that I never end up switching my sling to a single point setup. Almost never, just because I set up my 2-point so that it's just as easy to transition my shoulder. And the reason for that is if I'm doing any type of close quarter stuff or, practicing sock P or doing whatever, and I'm about to go into a room, I'm not thinking to myself, okay, I need to switch shoulders here. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to go hands-on, so I'm going to go ahead and click that in single point before I go in there, and then some dude tackles me, and I'm like, ah, crap, and I'm trying to wrestle with him, and I got the gun between me and him. It's for that reason that I pretty much just keep my rifle in a 2-point setup. And that's why I've moved away from the convertible slings, although they are very good if you do want that capability. I just keep my slings in a 2-point setup that is set up in such a way that it's easy to switch shoulders and do everything that a single point can do, but also has all the benefits of a 2-point. So the question is, what makes a 2-point sling so effective? Well, it's several things. One, when you need to go hands off your weapon, it tends to drop in an advantageous position to do anything from transition to sidearm, to be able to sling it away from yourself so that you can do other things. What's also good about the 2-point is that should you need to climb or do any amount of activity that requires that the rifle be slung on your back, it's quite easy to do so with a 2-point sling. Finally, the 2-point sling can be set up so that you can easily transition shoulders. Now, it's not going to be quite as easy as it is with a single point, though it is still quite simple. As long as you practice and keep at it, you'll be very smooth in your transitions. So the question I get a lot is, how do I set up my 2-point sling to enable me to do those variety of things and make it work for me? So we'll go ahead and explain that. So I have the back of the sling mounted to the rear of the receiver. The reason I do this is it allows it to work almost like a single point sling when I'm transitioning shoulder to shoulder. At the front of the rifle, I have it positioned behind my support hand. The reason for that is I keep my sling very tight when I'm shooting to absorb some of the recoil. Because of that, the sling will come over my support side when I'm shooting. As a result, I place the sling behind my hand. That way, when I'm doing mag changes and that type of thing, my hand isn't getting caught up inside the sling as I'm trying to re-grab and control my rifle once again. So that's some of the reasoning behind my setup. So one last thing is I use QD mounts for my sling. That way I can adjust the sling as needed. For example, if I need more stability in my rifle, should I need to sling it for long periods of time, I can simply move my QD slot to the back of the buttstock. That way it will have more stability while I'm carrying it on my back. So again, set up your rifle so that it's going to work for you. Although QD mounts are good, they do have some limitations. There are other different types of mounts out there. Research, find one that works for you. I've just always used QD mounts because I find them effective and simple in their usage. One other thing to note as far as my sling setup is where I have the buttstock placed. If you notice with the tightness of the sling right now, that the buttstock is approximately where it goes when I have the rifle up to fire. The reason for that is when I bring the rifle up to my shoulder, I don't have to lift the rifle up or do anything crazy. I simply, with my support hand, bring the front end up and the buttstock pretty much falls into my shoulder so I can fire.
37.
So now that we've talked about a couple ways that I've set up my 2-point sling, let's talk about a couple really good dedicated 2-point slings. I'd be remiss not to start with the Viking Tactic Sling, which is one of the first slings that I used on my issue rifle. Now, that sling works really well. It's very similar to a lot of the slings that we're going to talk about in the fact that it's a piece of webbing and it's adjustable. Now, the way that it adjusts is it is a length of webbing at the end that you pull to take the slack out of the sling. Now, because of that, there is a length of webbing or a tail that just hangs off when you tighten it down. So that's not the best thing to have, as it can get entangled in different things. So it's for that reason that I no longer use it. Now, that being said, the Viking Tactic Sling has been used for a long time in multiple combat environments, and the rifles that sling has been attached to have killed a lot of people. So it'd be hard to say that it's not a good sling. It's a very good sling. I just believe that there are better designs out there nowadays that can accomplish the same task. Another good sling for 2-point setups is the Blue Force Gear Vickers Sling. Now, the Vickers Sling, instead of using a tail, has a captured loop, which most 2-point slings have nowadays. Because of that, there's no tail that hangs out. So a couple slings that improve upon that would be the Haley Strategic Gh3 sling, which is a convertible sling, and then also the Ferro Concepts Slingster sling, which is the one I'm using right now. Now, the thing I like about the Slingster is that it has an adjustable pad for the shoulder where it can be moved based on the size of your body. It's very easily adjustable and sizable to your rifle. And for the adjustment tab, it is a simple rubber tab right here that when pulled up will release the mechanism and allow you to slide it. Once released, it will then lock in place. So it's very easy to adjust your rifle as necessary. That's one reason I like the Slingster quite a bit. Now, this sling does have more hardware on it. So let's go to one of the simplest slings out there, and probably one of the most effective, which is the Proctor Way of the Gun Sling. If you aren't familiar with Frank Proctor, he was a Special Forces dude, pretty groovy, great shooter, has some great ideas. Now, with his sling, what he has done is he simply uses loops of 550 to attach the sling to your rifle. It's a very simple setup and there's no hardware needed. Because of that, it's very quiet. One problem with the Proctor sling is it is very narrow. So I prefer to use this on rifles that are approximately 8.5 pounds or less. Anything over that, and the sling over time will begin to dig into you. It's not a huge problem, it's just something to consider. The Proctor sling is incredibly easy to adjust. It uses a glide buckle. So again, if you're looking for a minimalist setup, I think the Proctor sling is an excellent sling and you'll be well served by using it. So guys, we've talked a little bit about slings. I hope you got some ideas. Find a sling that works for what you do, and no matter what, make sure it looks cool. Otherwise, nothing else matters. Thank you for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more videos on cool stuff.